The fluorescent lights of Chicago O'Hare cast harsh shadows across the polished floors as Emily Carter adjusted the baby carrier against her chest. Grace slept peacefully, her tiny fist curled around a corner of her pink blanket, oblivious to the chaos of travelers rushing past them. Emily checked her boarding pass again. Gate B12, Denver, a new beginning. She had rehearsed this moment countless times. During the sleepless nights of the past 13 months, a fresh start, a modest job as a freelance translator, a small apartment where she could raise Grace without the weight of memories pressing down on every corner. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister Safe Travels. "You're doing the right thing." Emily wasn't sure about that, but she was sure about one thing: she couldn't stay in Chicago anymore. Every street corner held a ghost, every coffee shop a memory of what used to be. As she walked toward the gate, Grace stirred slightly, making the soft cooing sound that always melted Emily's heart. She pressed a gentle kiss to her daughter's forehead, breathing in that sweet baby scent that had become her anchor through the hardest year of her life. "Almost there, sweetheart," she whispered. That's when she saw him. Nathan Reed stood at the coffee counter, his dark hair perfectly styled, wearing the kind of expensive suit that had once made her feel both proud and small at the same time. He was scrolling through his phone. The same impatient gesture she remembered from countless mornings when work calls interrupted their breakfast. For a moment, Emily's feet refused to move. Her heart hammered against her ribs, and she instinctively pulled Grace closer. She could turn around. She could take a different route to the gate. He hadn't seen her yet, but as if sensing her presence, Nathan looked up. Their eyes met across the crowded terminal, and Emily watched as recognition dawned on his face. First confusion, then something that looked almost like relief, and finally his gaze dropped to the baby in her arms, even from 20 feet away. She could see the exact moment he understood. Nathan's phone slipped from his fingers, clattering to the floor unnoticed. His face went pale as his eyes fixed on Grace, taking in the unmistakable features: same dark hair, the same stubborn jawline that had made Emily smile during pregnancy, wondering if their child would inherit his determined streak. Emily stood frozen as Nathan began walking toward them, his steps hesitant but inevitable. She had dreamed of this moment and dreaded it in equal measure. All the letters she had written and never sent. All the phone calls that went straight to voicemail. All the nights she had practiced what she would say if she ever saw him again. Now, with her daughter sleeping peacefully against her chest and her future waiting at gate B12, Emily realized that no amount of preparation could have readied her for the look in Nathan's eyes, a mixture of shock, pain, and something that looked dangerously close to hope. "Emily." Nathan's voice was barely above a whisper when he finally reached them. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Grace shifted in her carrier, and Emily automatically swayed to soothe her, the motion so natural now that she barely noticed it. "Is she?" Nathan's voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. "How old is she?" 13 months? The words came out steady. Matter dash of dash fact. Emily watched Nathan's face as he did the math. Saw the moment when the timeline aligned with their last night together. That night when their relationship had finally shattered under the weight of his work obsession and her growing need for something real, something permanent. "Why didn't you tell me?" The question hung between them like an accusation. Emily felt a familiar surge of anger, the same fury that had sustained her through labor pains with no one to hold her hand, through countless 3 a.m. feedings when Grace had colic, through the crushing loneliness of new motherhood. "I tried," she said, her voice quiet but sharp. "I called 17 times. I sent emails. I even went to your office building twice." Nathan's brow furrowed. "I never got any because you blocked me." The words came out harder than she intended, causing a nearby family to glance over. Emily lowered her voice. "After that night, after you made it clear that I was just another distraction from your precious career, you made sure I couldn't reach you." The truth of it settled between them. Emily remembered those desperate weeks after she'd found out she was pregnant. The panic of facing it alone, the humiliation of being turned away by Nathan's assistant, who had clearly been instructed to keep her out. I didn't know, Nathan said, and there was something broken in his voice that made Emily's anger waver for just a moment. You didn't want to know, she corrected. There's a difference. Grace stirred and opened her eyes, blinking up at the bright airport lights with the kind of curiosity that always amazed Emily. At 13 months, Grace was becoming her own person, stubborn, like her father, determined like her mother, with a laugh that could light up the darkest moments. Nathan's breath caught as he looked at his daughter for the first time. Really looked at her. She has your eyes, he said softly. And your stubborn chin, Emily replied before she could stop herself. For a moment, something almost like a smile crossed Nathan's face. But then the airport's intercom crackled to life. Final boarding call for Flight 1247 to Denver. Must board immediately. Emily's heart lurched. Her new life was waiting. The job, the apartment, the chance to start over somewhere Nathan's shadow couldn't reach her. You're leaving, Nathan said, and it wasn't a question. We're leaving, Emily corrected, adjusting Grace's carrier. I have a job in Denver. A chance for Grace to grow up somewhere stable. Don't go. Ow. The words tumbled out of Nathan's mouth. Before he could stop them, please. I know I have no right to ask, but you're right, Emily said, cutting him off. You don't have the right. No? You lost that right when you chose your board meetings over us, when you decided that what we had was disposable. But even as she said the words, Emily felt her resolve wavering. Grace was looking at Nathan with open curiosity, the way she looked at everything new and interesting. As if she recognized something in his face, some genetic memory that connected them despite the months of absence. 5 minutes, Nathan said desperately. Just give me 5 minutes to what? Emily's voice was tired now, worn down by 13 months of single parenthood and the emotional exhaustion of this encounter. To explain why you disappeared? To promise you've changed? I heard all of this before, Nathan, right up until the moment you walked away. But Grace chose that moment to reach out, her tiny hand extending toward Nathan with the kind of innocent trust that only babies possessed. Nathan's eyes filled with tears. He was clearly fighting back. And despite everything, the anger, the hurt, the carefully constructed walls around her heart, Emily found herself hesitating. The final boarding call echoed through the terminal again. More urgent this time. Her future was waiting at gate B12. But the past, it seemed, wasn't quite ready to let her go. Time seemed suspended as Grace continued reaching toward Nathan, her small fingers opening and closing as if trying to grasp something just out of reach. Emily felt her carefully built resolve beginning to crack. What's her name? Nathan asked, his voice thick with emotion. Grace, Emily replied softly. Grace, Nathan repeated, and the way he said it, like a prayer, like an apology, made Emily's chest tighten. Without fully understanding why, Emily found herself unstrapping Grace from the carrier. Maybe it was the exhaustion of carrying this secret alone for so long, or maybe it was the way her daughter was looking at Nathan with such open curiosity. Whatever the reason, she lifted Grace, and after a moment's hesitation, placed her in Nathan's arms. Nathan went very still, as if afraid that any sudden movement might break the spell. Grace settled against him with surprising ease, her tiny hand finding the button on his shirt and gripping it with that fierce strength babies seemed to possess. She's beautiful, Nathan whispered, his voice breaking slightly. She's perfect. Emily watched as years of carefully maintained composure crumbled from Nathan's face. This was the man she had fallen in love with 3 years ago, the polished CEO in expensive suits. But the vulnerable person underneath, who had once told her about his own absent father, about his fear of repeating those patterns. I was in labor for 18 hours, Emily said quietly. Not sure why she was sharing this. She was born at 3:47 in the morning, 7 pounds, 2 ounces. The doctor said she had the strongest grip he'd ever seen in a newborn. Nathan looked up at her, tears now flowing freely down his cheeks. I should have been there. Yes, Emily said simply. You should have been. Grace babbled softly, a string of nonsensical syllables that always made Emily smile. To her surprise, Nathan smiled too, the kind of automatic response that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than conscious thought. Does she walk yet? Nathan asked. She's been pulling herself up on furniture for the past month. Any day now, I think. And her favorite food, bananas cut into tiny pieces. She makes this face. When she eats them, Emily stopped herself. Why was she doing this? Why was she sharing these precious details with the man who had missed all of these milestones by choice? But Nathan was looking at Grace with such wonder, such obvious love, that Emily felt something shift inside her chest. The anger was still there, but it was mixing now with something more complicated, a recognition that this moment was bigger than their past hurt. I know, I don't deserve this, Nathan said, his voice barely audible. I know I gave up any claim to her when I walked away from you. But Emily, if there's any chance, any possibility that it could be part of her life, you don't understand what you're asking, Emily said. This isn't about weekend visits and birthday cards. Being a parent means showing up when you're exhausted, when she's sick, when work is calling, but she needs you more. It means putting her first, always, even when it's inconvenient. I know, Nathan said, and there was something different in his voice now, something Emily had never heard before. But a kind of desperate determination. I know. I failed her. I failed you. But I want to try to be the father she deserves. Grace chose that moment to look up at Emily and make the little sound she always made when she wanted attention. Soft ma 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 that never failed to melt Emily's heart. But this time, she followed it with something new, something that made both adults freeze. Da-da-da, Grace babbled, looking directly at Nathan. It was probably meaningless babies babbled all kinds of sounds. But the timing, the way she looked at him when she said it, seemed almost intentional. Nathan's composure finally broke completely. He pulled Grace closer, pressing his face against her soft hair, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. And Emily, despite everything, despite 13 months of anger and hurt and single motherhood, found herself crying too, because this was the moment she had dreamed of, and dreaded in equal measure the moment when Grace would have her father. Emily would have to decide if she could risk her heart again for her daughter's sake. The gate area had grown quiet around them. Emily's flight was gone, but somehow she couldn't bring herself to care. Not yet. For the first time in 13 months, Grace was in her father's arms. And for the first time since that painful night when everything fell apart, Emily allowed herself to wonder if maybe, just maybe, some broken things could be repaired. 3 weeks later, Emily stood in the doorway of her small Chicago apartment, watching Nathan attempt to change Grace's diaper while she squirmed and giggled on the changing table. She's doing this on purpose, Nathan muttered, trying to keep Grace's feet from kicking while he wrestled with the diaper tabs. She likes you, Emily said, smiling despite herself. That's why she's being extra wiggly. This would be easier if she would just hold still for 30 seconds. Emily moved to help, but Nathan held up a hand. No, I've got this. I need to learn. It had become his mantra over the past 3 weeks. I need to learn. He'd said it when Grace spit up on his expensive shirt during their first feeding attempt. He'd said it when she cried for 20 minutes straight and nothing seemed to comfort her. He'd said it during the disastrous first bath when he'd been too afraid to get her face wet, and she'd somehow managed to soak them both. But he'd also said it during the magic moment when Grace had laughed at his terrible singing, when she'd fallen asleep on his chest after a particularly fussy evening, when she'd taken her first real steps just yesterday, stumbling from Emily's arms into Nathan's waiting embrace. There, Nathan said triumphantly, finally securing the diaper. Victory is mine. Grace immediately rolled over and crawled toward the edge of the changing table, requiring Nathan to quickly scoop her up. She's fast, he said, settling her on his hip with the ease that had surprised Emily the most over these past weeks. She's 13 months old, Emily replied. Fast is her default setting now. Emily watched as Nathan automatically swayed slightly, the motion that all parents learn to soothe restless babies. It had taken him exactly 4 days to pick up the habit. For days to start thinking like a father instead of a businessman. I got the final call from Denver today, Emily said, settling onto the couch. Nathan's swaying stopped, and they can't hold the position any longer. They've offered it to someone else. Nathan's face was carefully neutral. How do you feel about that? Emily had been asking herself the same question all day. 3 weeks ago, That job had represented freedom, a fresh start, a chance to build a life untainted by the past. Now I feel like maybe I wasn't running towards something as much as I was running away from something, she said honestly. Nathan sat beside her, Grace still in his arms. And now I think maybe it's time to stop running, Grace babbled happily, and reached for one of her toys scattered across the coffee table. Over the past 3 weeks, Nathan's pristine bachelor apartment had slowly transformed. Baby toys in the living room, a high chair in the kitchen, a crib in what used to be his home office. I've been thinking, Nathan said carefully, about how to make this work long term. Nathan, I know, he said quickly. No, we're not getting back together. You've made that clear. But Emily, I want to be a real father to Grace. Not a weekend visitor or a holiday parent. I want to be present for the everyday moments. Emily studied his face. Over the past 3 weeks, she'd watched him cancel meetings to take Grace to her pediatrician appointment, seen him leave work early to be home for bath time, and witnessed him pace the floor at midnight when Grace was fussing with another tooth. Coming in, "What are you suggesting?" she asked. "I've been looking at houses," Nathan said. "Places with separate living spaces. You and Grace could have your own apartment, complete privacy, but I'd be nearby. Close enough to help with nighttime. Wake-ups close enough to be part of her daily routine." Emily felt her heart rate pick up. "Nathan, that's a big step." "I know, but Emily, these past 3 weeks, they've been the best of my life. Not because they've been easy, they've been exhausting, but because they've mattered. Because she matters." Grace chose that moment to look up at Emily and clap her hands as if applauding her father's speech. "You really want this?" Emily asked. "The sleepless nights, the tantrums, the chaos of raising a child?" "I want her," Nathan said simply. "I want to be the father she deserves. I want you to have support, Emily. You shouldn't have to do this alone anymore." Emily was quiet for a long time, watching Grace play with Nathan's watch band, the same fascination she'd shown that first day at the airport. "There would have to be rules," she said finally. Hope flickered in Nathan's eyes. "Whatever you need, Grace comes first. Always. If your work interferes with her needs, work loses." "Agreed. And we take this slow. We're not a family, Nathan. We're co-parents. That's all." Nathan nodded, though Emily caught a flicker of something that might have been disappointment in his expression. "And if you disappear again," Emily continued, her voice soft but firm, "if you decide this is too hard or too complicated, you don't get another chance. Grace won't go through that abandonment twice. Won't disappear," Nathan said, his voice steady. "I swear to you, Emily, I won't disappear." Emily looked at Grace, who had somehow managed to get Nathan's watch off his wrist and was now examining it with intense concentration. Her daughter looked happy, settled, as if having both her parents present was the most natural thing in the world. Maybe it was. "Okay," Emily said softly. Okay, we'll try. We'll figure out how to be a family, even if it's not the kind of family I once imagined." Nathan's smile was radiant. "Thank you, Emily. I swear I won't let you down." "Don't let her down," Emily corrected, nodding toward Grace. "I'm a grown woman. I can take care of myself. But she needs to know that when you say you'll be there, you'll be there. I'll be there," Nathan promised. Grace babbled loudly, as if adding her own agreement to the conversation. Both adults laughed, looking at them together, her daughter, content in her father's arms. Nathan's face soft with wonder and love. Emily felt something she hadn't experienced in 13 months. Peace, maybe. They couldn't recapture what they'd once had. Maybe they'd never again be the couple who had once talked about growing old together. But perhaps they could build something different, something better. Perhaps they could build a family. Grace clapped her hands again, delighted by the sound of their laughter, and Emily thought that maybe, just maybe, the best journeys weren't the ones that took you far from home, but the ones that brought you back to what mattered most. Asterisk. The end. Asterisk. Asterisk. Like this video. If the story touched your heart, subscribe for more emotional tales and share with someone who believes in the power of true love. And let us know in the comments. We love connecting with our global community of romance lovers.